What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. Very special episode this week. We've got a great guest. Jay Glazer from Fox Sports is with us. He's telling us what the league thinks of Mac Jones, what the Patriots might do next at the offensive coordinator spot. Really good conversation that we will get to very quickly. But first, I do think it's appropriate for us to hit on this Patriots coaching staff situation. Not only has Josh McDaniels left, but he has taken assistant quarterbacks coach Bo Hardegree with him. He has taken Patriots receivers coach Mick Lombardi with him to be offensive coordinator. He's taken Patriots offensive line coach Carmen Bricillo with him to be offensive line coach. In Vegas, the Patriots may lose Ivan Fears, their running backs coach. So there has been a lot of turnover on the Patriots sideline this offseason. Of course, we know Joe Judge has been hired to be an offensive assistant. And so I'll just tell you what I have heard, what I have been told over the course of the last week or so as these moves have transpired. As far as it goes with Judge, who has been hired as an offensive assistant, and we understand why the titles sometimes for somebody who is in Judge's position are a little hazy because they're still getting paid by their teams that had fired them, whether it's Matt Patricia or Joe Judge. And so as long as you keep the title somewhat nebulous and you're able to give them certain responsibilities that don't rise necessarily to the level of, say, a coordinator position on either side of the ball, then you can get the value that you're looking for in hiring these guys who are still being paid massive sums of money by their last teams. When I talk to people about Joe Judge and his potential offensive role for New England, it is not viewed as offensive coordinator. Now, that is talking to people league-wide who look at the Patriots situation and say they need an established veteran offensive play caller, which, of course, Joe Judge is not. He's a very smart football mind. We know Bill Belichick believes that. Bill Belichick has talked in the past about how Joe Judge could coach any position on the field. He played quarterback. Obviously, he's coached special teams. Obviously, he's now been a head coach. Bill Belichick has immense respect for Joe Judge, who Bill Belichick promoted to or added to Joe Judge's responsibilities as special teams coordinator, the title of receivers coach back in 2019, before he ended up getting the Giants job. So they had him on that offensive track. And I've said this on the podcast before, but I've been told that had Josh McDaniels gone to Indy, one of the things the Patriots would have done to try to get Joe Judge to stay in New England is give him a very significant role offensively that might have risen to essentially offensive coordinator, whether he actually had that title or not, thereby potentially setting himself up nicely to eventually become a head coach. Turns out he didn't need that. He didn't need that kind of responsibility on the offensive side to get his shot with the Giants. But that's what I heard at the time would have been what the Patriots tried to pursue. But talking to folks around the league, they are flabbergasted, flummoxed. Some of them, I would say, borderline insulted at the idea of Joe Judge calling offensive plays for the Patriots, just because he doesn't have that experience. Now, these same people that I've spoken to will also acknowledge that Bill Belichick does what he wants, and he doesn't care about what the rest of the league thinks when it comes to offensive, defensive, special teams, assistants, and the roles or the responsibilities that Bill Belichick is giving to those people. So they don't completely rule out that Joe Judge is the offensive play caller in 2022, and I won't either. But I give you this information saying that it is my belief that it is still a possibility that the Patriots will add a more experienced coordinator like Bill O'Brien, like Adam Gase, to usher Mac Jones into year 2 of his professional development. Joe Judge, Matt Patricia, these guys have never coached the quarterback position. They've never called offensive plays. I would look at somebody like Nick Caley as maybe an even more viable candidate to become offensive coordinator. He's been tight ends coach here in New England for years. He's not a kid. He is just about 40 years old. I think he's 38, 39. He has experience helping Josh McDaniels formulate offensive game plans. He's been key in that regard over the course of the last several years. And he coaches a position that is hugely involved in both the running and passing games. And so he understands this Patriots offense inside and out as somebody who has been here, who has been part of the planning, who's been here with Mac Jones. who's watched Mac Jones develop and has seen the offense develop around him over the course of a full season. So if it's not O'Brien or Gase, I wonder if Bill Belichick wouldn't turn to somebody like Caley and give him more responsibility and allow Joe Judge to be sort of what my understanding Matt Patricia was on the defensive and even at times the special teams sides for the Patriots, which is sort of a utility coach. Wherever you need him, he can fill in. He's smart enough. He understands the system. He understands what Bill Belichick wants, and he can provide some real value in that regard. We'll see how it all shakes out. But again, I think there is still enough time. I think sooner rather than later would be the way you would want to go about this if you're Bill Belichick. It's Valentine's Day as we're taping right now. But there is time for the Patriots to add to their staff. There's time for other staffs to shake out. Who knows? Maybe the Patriots end up losing another assistant. I mean, again, Caley is somebody who is respected around the league. Smart, young, energetic coach. Maybe there's an opening somewhere where he ends up getting scooped up, and now you're looking to fill another spot. So this is something that the Patriots are going to have to deal with, and I wrote about it in my mailbag over the weekend. It would be wise for Bill Belichick to simply gather up as much coaching talent as he can right now, and then sort out the roles once the dust settles, once all the departures have been finalized, once he figures out who's available and who can join his staff. Just get as many smart football people as you can, because you're in that kind of a situation now. You've lost so many folks. You've got to be able to fill in the gaps however you can. It's an on-the-fly sort of plan. And we talked on the Patriots Talk podcast about how that's not ideal. Like, you might want to have a better succession plan in place for somebody like Josh McDaniels, who's been so important to this Patriots offense for years. My counter to that is that it's really hard to do that when you're losing assistants left and right for years. Right? Whether it's Chad O'Shea or Jerry Shaplinsky leaving with Joe Judge. We know all the people that went to Miami with Brian Flores. Now it's happening on the offensive side. It's hard to develop that pipeline when your young guys are getting taken. Right? Josh McDaniels was a Patriots lifer. From a very young age, he started with the Patriots. He's on the defensive side to start, but he works his way up under Charlie Weiss. Eventually, he gets the offensive coordinator title, and you're able to plug him right in. The Patriots system and the Patriots staff has been turned over so significantly as GMs have gone other places, as coaches have gone other places, that it's hard to point to someone who has had a track similar to McDaniels or Patricia. These guys that came very, very young and worked their way all the way up the ladder to become coordinators here in New England. Caley sort of fits that mold. Now, he's bounced around the country and he's worked at college programs. He's been a lot of different places before he got to New England. But that's sort of more the mold than bringing back somebody who's worked on the other side of the ball, then become a head coach, and then forcing them to flip sides and flip their expertise in the sport and asking them to have the most important job on the staff, essentially, outside of Bill Belichick. It's a lot to ask either Judge or Patricia. So that's why when I look at this, I still am not ruling anything out. And just tell you too, from what I understand, talking to folks about Mick Lombardi and that transition to McDaniels' staff, and could he have been potentially the offensive coordinator here in New England? Very well respected here. Obviously, his dad, Mike Lombardi, incredibly well respected by Bill Belichick. They remain good friends. They remain very close. My understanding with McDaniels is that he will be calling plays in Vegas, at least early, or that's the plan for right now. And then once he feels comfortable with his offensive coordinator, now we know that's Mick Lombardi, then he'll hand the reins over to that person. So I'm not sure Mick Lombardi's going to step in right away and be a play caller. We see this happen all over the league. Sean McVay's still calling plays. Kyle Shanahan's still calling plays. Those guys still have offensive coordinators. So it would not be unusual for Mick Lombardi not to be the play caller, but it'll be interesting to see how his responsibilities and his role develops as he spends more time with Josh McDaniels out there in Vegas. 2 podcasts from last week that hopefully you were able to listen to at the time. If you haven't, maybe go back, check them out. My sit-down interview with Mac Jones, he talks about, that offensive coordinator spot, how difficult it might be to deal without Josh McDaniels. He has all kinds of faith in Bill Belichick to hire somebody who's going to be able to do things the right way and in such a way that Mac Jones is able to get closer to his ceiling in this early portion of his career. So it didn't sense a lot of stress from Mac Jones in that regard. He is an in Bill we trust guy. At least that's how he made it sound to us in our conversation. He did say he hadn't yet spoken to Joe Judge, and Joe Judge had only been on the staff for a few days when I spoke to Jones, but I thought that was noteworthy. It's not like they have a meeting tomorrow. It's not like they're going to be on the practice field tomorrow and that Joe Judge and Mac Jones have to have an established relationship in the middle of February. I understand that. But if he was hired to be the play caller, if he was hired to be the guy and he's going to be running the offense, it would make sense to me that he would try to reach out to Mac Jones and just establish something early on. But that hadn't happened yet. This was as of late last week, as of Friday last week. So we'll see again how all these roles develop. But I'm thinking that it's still a fluid picture at the moment. The other podcast you should check out, because this is part of the discussion there as well, is the Patriots Talk podcast, Tom Curran and his sit down with Julian Edelman. So we're hearing from some key players here when it comes to this Patriots offense. One currently a key player, one formerly a very key player for the Patriots offense, but who obviously has a lot of institutional knowledge when it comes to that offense and it comes to that building and how things operate. Julian Edelman had sort of the same reaction that a lot of people have that I've spoken to that are in the business when bringing up Joe Judge and the potential that he might be calling plays. He also had some nice things to say about Nick Caley. So go back, make sure you check out that interview between Curran and Edelman. Okay, really quickly here, I wanted to mention this as well before we get to our interview with Jay Glazer. We've got a brand spanking new mock draft on NBCSportsBoston.com right now. Make sure you go check that thing out. The Patriots making a very interesting selection at number 21 overall. And yes, they do make a selection at number 21 overall. I've spoken about the draft quite a bit over the course of the last week or so. My understanding is that this is a top-heavy draft in terms of the true quote-unquote first-round talent available. Top-heavy meaning you might have teams that have 8, 10 players in that first tier, and then after that, you have a talent drop-off. So where the Patriots are picking at number 21 overall, that is, based on their history, that is prime trade-down territory. And if they can pick up a couple of extra picks, even if it's a future pick, I wonder if they would think about doing something like that, which they've done in the past, but they haven't been in the past in need of quite as much immediate help as they are right now as we sit here in 2022. So that would be surprising to me, but a trade down would not be. Where this draft looks relatively deep, especially early, is on the offensive line. You're going to see a lot of tackles go off in the first round. I think there is some real corner talent in the first round, and that should appeal to Patriots fans, especially if J.C. Jackson is potentially not back with the team, whether they let him walk a la Trey Flowers or they tag and trade him. I think there is a real possibility that he's no longer with New England in 2022. And from what I've heard, what I've been told, things are quiet on the J.C. Jackson front when it comes to the Patriots and their communication about a new deal right now. My understanding is he was approached during the season with a contract offer from the Patriots. That offer was rebuffed. And so here we sit, J.C. Jackson about to hit unrestricted free agency. And again, things are quiet. That doesn't mean things won't pick up. This is typically how the Patriots operate. They only communicate when they have to, and they are certainly on their end going to try to make things as they progress, if they progress at all, as quiet as possible in the public and the media. So those are two positions that look like there is some strength in this year's first round. The other is at receiver. And after watching the Super Bowl, you tell me, my biggest takeaway was the Patriots need a true number one. I wrote about this last week. I've talked to people throughout the league about what the Patriots can do to help shove Mac Jones's development in the right direction in year two. The way they are played by opposing defenses, where they are so focused on the run. Ivan Fears had a great quote middle of last season, said, "We never see too high coverages." You know why? Because teams are dying to stop the run against the Patriots. Well, that means they're seeing single high coverages with an extra body in the box. What does that mean if you're the Patriots offense? Your receivers are on islands, one-on-one matchups with opposing corners very frequently, with only one safety in the deep middle to help on either side. Those are the kinds of looks you want as an offense if you're trying to push the ball down the field. The problem for the Patriots is that they just don't have that down the field threat. They need somebody out there who can threaten defenses, who can soften them up, who can potentially every once in a while force a too high safety coverage, because those defenses are afraid of getting beat down the field. And if you have that, now you can open up your running game even a little bit more. And you're forcing the defense to pick its poison. If we drop a safety into the box, we've got a number one stud out here who needs safety help consistently that we're leaving on an island. Well, if we drop that safety deep, now we're opening up ourselves to a really formidable Patriots run game. So to me, the priority should be getting that number one, that guy you trust, whether he's an inside guy or an outside guy. Cooper Kupp's an inside guy. He's a number one, though. You trust him in every situation. You trust him in crunch time. You trust him to create separation. And even when he doesn't, you trust him enough to throw it to him anyway. Matthew Stafford force-fed Cooper Kupp in the fourth quarter on that game-winning drive against the Bengals. He was going to be the one to take them down the field and win the game, and he did. And now those guys are rare. But there is receiving talent that comes out into the draft every single year. And just because the Patriots missed on N'Keal Harry doesn't mean they should stop trying. So at pick number 21 overall, I'll go through the mock very quickly with you. There are already a number of tackles off the board. And to me, tackle is a position that the Patriots could potentially address in free agency. Even if it's just with a one-year stopgap type of player like Dwayne Brown, spent a lot of time with the Seahawks. Great left tackle. Getting up there in terms of age. But would you rather have him or would you rather have Trent Brown, who's missed 19 games over the course of the last 2 years, who also might be willing to play for a short-term deal, but might be looking for a little bit more money? I don't know. We'll see how the markets play out for these individual players. But we know number one receiving talent in free agency is very expensive. And if the Patriots don't want to go that route, after paying Kendrick Bourne a little bit last year, after paying Nelson Aguilar probably more than they would have liked last year, maybe they can hit it in the draft. So you're going to see a lot of tackle talent come off the board here in this mock draft. Evan Neal from Alabama to the Jags at number 1. Ike Ekwonu from NC State at number 3 to the Texans. You have a couple of edge defenders in Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeau go at number 2 and number 4. The Jets get Thibodeau there. The Jets have 2 top 10 picks, Patriots fans. So worth paying attention to what goes on at the very top of the draft this year. Another tackle off the board in Charles Cross to the Giants at number 5. Ahmad Sauce Gardner, first corner off the board at number 6 to the Panthers. Tyler Linderbaum, center from Iowa, goes 7 to the Giants. George Karlatis, edge defender from Purdue, goes at number 8 to the Falcons. Derek Stingley, corner from LSU, to the Broncos at 9. The Jets again at 10 take Garrett Wilson. So there's your first receiver off the board from Ohio State at number 1 overall. Well, I think it's a relatively deep receiver class. You don't have that true number 2 overall, number 3 overall, number 4 overall talent like a Jamar Chase last year. But Wilson might be the best of the bunch. I have him at number 10 to the Jets. You have Nakobe Dean off to the Commodores at 11. Kenyon Green, another offensive lineman, to the Vikings at 12. Chris Olave to the Browns at 13. Okay, so now we're starting to see some receivers come off the board here. Kyle Hamilton, number 14 to the Ravens. Kaiir Elam, the corner from Florida, he goes to the Eagles at 15. The Eagles have back-to-back picks. They take David Ojabo, edge defender from Michigan, Aiden Hutchinson's teammate, but a freaky athlete in his own right. Number 17, Drake London is replacing Mike Williams for the Chargers. Mike Williams is going to be a free agent this year. Okay, again, Patriots fans, you might be interested in Mike Williams. He's going to cost you a lot of money. Number 18, the Saints. They take Jamison Williams from Alabama, the receiver. So not Mac Jones's teammate, but he's from Mac Jones's program. His first year was at Alabama in 2021. But the Saints are looking like they're going to be rebuilding. Williams might not even be ready to play all that much early in 2022, if at all early in 2022. So they're punting to 2023 anyway. Williams will be ready to go by then. That's the logic behind that pick. Number 19, the Eagles take Devin Lloyd, another guy who's been tied to the Patriots on this very podcast. The linebacker out of Utah. The Steelers take the first quarterback in this draft at number 20, Kenny Pickett from Pitt. Now, those guys will be probably driven up the board a little bit by the time we get a little bit closer to the draft. But that's how we have the first 20 picks coming off the board. We know the Patriots are sitting there at 21. So who's left? And do they sit or do they trade back? You've got Bernard Raymond, the offensive tackle from Central Michigan, who I like a lot. I think has a ton of room to grow. He's still relatively new to the sport. Came to the States as a tight end. He's from Austria. All kinds of athleticism, all kinds of strength. He looks like a ready-made player in the run game right now. So I could see him seamlessly filling in at that right tackle spot. So if the Patriots do fill their number one receiver need in free agency, man, Raymond's right there. He's right there for you out of Central Michigan. Andrew Booth, the corner. You want somebody who can replace J.C. Jackson out of Clemson. That's somebody who has a lot of experience turning the ball over, has great hands. I don't know if he's going to be the interception machine that J.C. Jackson has been, probably not in the NFL, but that wouldn't be a bad decision on Bill Belichick's part. Trent McDuffie from Washington, another talented corner. Roger McCreary, maybe he's a slot out of Auburn. Some Jonathan Jones vibes there with McCreary. He's still available. Trevor Penning, the tackle from Northern Iowa, who is a mean SOB and proved it at the Senior Bowl, a little bit of an up and down Senior Bowl, but he's got all kinds of skills and strength and size. And if you refine him just a little bit, you could have a real player there. He's available as well. So where do the Patriots go here? They get their number one guy. It's Treylon Burks, wide receiver out of Arkansas, 6'3", 225 pounds. He wears 4X gloves, even though they barely fit him. He said last season he wears the 4X gloves, but after he wears them for about a week, he's worn them out. These things are probably looking pretty raggedy, probably had some holes in them because his hands, they barely fit into those things. Massive hands catcher, but a tremendous athlete after the catch. And this is why I think he'd be a great fit for the Patriots. He's been used inside. He's been used outside. He's been used as a running back. He's been used in the Wildcat. Not that the Patriots are planning on running that probably very much anytime soon. But it just shows you the kind of versatility that he has. And the fact that he's been productive in the SEC. He went off for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns on 8 catches against Alabama last season. And he was reportedly playing through injury. A lot of talent in that Alabama secondary usually. And this guy looked like a man among boys. Nick Saban, before that game even happened, called him a great player. Said he's a physical mismatch. He's bigger than most of the guys that are trying to guard him. It's kind of like a point guard trying to cover a power forward type guy who can run fast. Sometimes those mismatches are difficult. That's a challenge in this game. How do you do it? I don't know. Alabama never really figured it out because he went off for almost 180 yards and 2 scores. And on one of those plays, he outruns the entire Alabama secondary like he's a high school senior and he's got a bunch of middle schoolers chasing after him. This guy is a special physical talent. He's also on the record saying he's not real big into social media, which we should take into account, as laughable as that sounds. I think he would be a personality fit. Everything I understand about Treylon Burks is that he's a humble guy. He's a hardworking guy, and he is not the most well-refined route runner, but his physical skill set is such that if you can figure out how to use him right away, you can teach him some of those things as you go. Now, maybe people are having some N'Keal Harry flashbacks here. But to me, Burks is much faster, number one. And number two, I think one of the reasons why N'Keal Harry hasn't worked has been almost as much attitude as it has been physical skill set. And so if you feel better about the attitude and you feel better about the athleticism playing at the NFL level, because this guy's coming from the SEC where we put up big numbers, not the Pac-10, no offense to the Pac-10, but it's a different ball game. You know, I think that would go a long way at one Patriot place. You missed on Deebo Samuel. You missed on A.J. Brown. You can't stop trying. Those guys are absolutely game changers. And this guy has the potential to be the same for Mac Jones. So he gets into a bind. You need to throw a bubble screen to a receiver and pick up an explosive gain. We know the Patriots would love the idea of that. But you can also have him run down the field, go up and make a play with those huge mitts and that great athleticism, and trust your guy to win a one-on-one. Watch the Bengals play. Watch how Joe Burrow trusts Jamar Chase. And I'm not saying Treylon Burks is Jamar Chase. He's not. But if you can get that kind of presence and you can establish that kind of chemistry Again, going to be really hard to do. Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase go back a long way. We understand that. But the Patriots need to upgrade there on the outside. They don't have enough. He would give them someone who is, in my opinion, more than intriguing to work with for years to come. So that's where I stand on it right now. We'll see how things go with the combine. We'll see how things go in terms of the injury checks. But right now, if you're asking me right now today, Valentine's Day, at pick number 21, if Burks is available, I'd say that's a home run, because I think that's exactly what the Patriots need to be able to take their team to another level, because I think they need to take their offense to another level to be able to do that. They certainly have holes on both sides of the ball. Don't get me wrong, but this is an offensive game. It is. And you can point to Aaron Donald, who should have been the MVP in the Super Bowl, and I would agree with you. You can point to Jalen Ramsey. If the Bengals can protect at all on Super Bowl Sunday, they probably win that game. You have to not allow 7 sacks. If they allowed 3 sacks instead, if they were just serviceable on the offensive line, I think they win that game, because they have the explosive playmakers on the outside, and they have the accurate and anticipatory quarterback, not an incredibly physically gifted quarterback, but a smart quarterback who's competitive and anticipates and knows where the ball is going to go and where it has to go. Because they had those things, they were in that game, and they lost because they didn't have an offensive line. I think the Patriots will have an offensive line. I don't think they'll ever let it get as bad as the Bengals. What they need is that presence on the outside to take them to that next level. All right, head on over to NBCSportsBoston.com to check out the rest of the mock draft. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Let me know what you think. If you can, leave a comment, the Apple iTunes section, in our review section, and give me your favorite Patriots mock pick for the first round. Number 21 overall. Who you taking? It doesn't have to follow with my mock draft. Who knows how this thing is going to go? Nobody knows. So don't think, well, this guy will never be around. That guy will never be around. Unless you're talking about Evan Neal or Ike Ekwonu or Kayvon Thibodeau or Aiden Hutchinson. Like, who knows? We don't know. Again, this draft isn't loaded with top tier first round, quote unquote, first round. What does that even mean? But it's not loaded with those types of players. So once you get past that first 8, 9, 10 guys, who knows how this thing's going to shake out? I would love to hear how you think it could shake out, how you would want it to shake out as a Patriots fan. All right, that'll be it for this portion of the podcast, but let's get right to our conversation right now. Thanks for sticking around, people. Thanks for sticking around for the Jay Glazer interview. It'll be worthwhile, I promise. He's promoting his new book, Unbreakable. Great message behind that book. We'll let him tell you all about it right now. All right, very happy to have with us now Jay Glazer on the Next Pats podcast. Jay, thanks for being with us. We want to mention your book right off the top. Jay Glazer, Unbreakable, How I Turned My Depression and Anxiety into Motivation, and you can too. I know a lot of people have really appreciated how open you've been with your mental health and everything you're talking about in the book. What can you tell us about the book and just the response that you've gotten, social media and elsewhere, to the message that you've been trying to send?
Yeah, look, God blessed me with the ability to communicate, and man, my whole life I have lived in what I call the gray, and it's not something I signed up for. I was born with it's clinical depression, anxiety, and by the way, ADD. So if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it big. But we talk about mental health, but who describes it? So I want to be the one to give it a voice and describe it so people can have that conversation. And you're talking about the response. It has been unbelievable. Like, I had an 80-year-old grandmother hit me up saying that for the first time in her life, she finally has the words to have this conversation with her family of this is what goes on between her ears. And a lot of girl dads saying, I don't have it, but now I can have the conversation with my 10-year-old daughter, my 14-year-old daughter. People are buying it for their kids. And, look, for me, it's a different voice. I'm not your doctor. I'm not your therapist. I'm not your clergy. I'm not your parent. I'm just a dude who's messed up, who's good with his messed upness. And look, I get a lot of people may look at me and go, like, what? What do you got to be sad about? It's not sad. It's depression, anxiety. And like, I do know my life is great. My life is awesome. But between my ears sucks. And every single day I wake up and it's a battle for me to get out of bed. I feel like the sky is falling. I suffer from a lot of panic and anxiety attacks, and which is weird for me because I'm great in chaos. Like, I'm incredible in chaos. I'm in a cage with Chuck Liddell, who was over here recently, Randy Couture, those guys. I feel so calm. TV, I feel calm. The rest of the world, the real calm I struggle with. So I really want to be able to use my experiences to at least show people they're not alone, start having the conversation. Every time I have opened up to somebody I'm close with or family or friend, anybody about my struggles, it's gotten me closer with them.
Well, and I know a lot of our listeners are dealing with this type of stuff. Nobody's immune to it, right? Even professional athletes. I'm sure athletes have reached out to you.
Well, you saw Lane Johnson and I did our thing. And so here's the crazy thing. Lane, I trained Lane in mixed martial arts 8 years ago, something along those lines. He lived with my son and I. He stayed with us. And he knew my struggles, and yet he still didn't open up to me about it until he fell off the reservation. And Strahan's been my best friend for 30 years. I didn't fully open up to him until 2 months ago. And he was like, why have you not told me? I said, I don't make the rules up of this thing, man. Like, for whatever reason, I was ashamed with you. And yet he was like, man, I could have been there for you. For 30 years, I could have been there for you. So that's what I want people to understand. Listen, this is for people who have clinical on my level, or, like you said, we just went through a pandemic where we were asked to socially distance, right? So we had to isolate. Or even just social media. We saw all this crap, on social media that make us think our lives suck, and comparing ourselves to everybody else's filtered fraction of a second. And it's not real, but it's hard to feel good about yourself when you see all this hate online or comparing yourself and you feel left out. So, man, it's time we start fighting back. And that's why I want to be that voice that we can all round up. I'm rounding up an army of us crazies, if you will, and I'm starting to fight back. We need to fight back. And, I mean, you see the epidemic, too, of suicide. Like, Miss USA just killed herself. The most beautiful woman in the world still felt that lonely. So, man, it's not okay anymore for us to suffer in silence. We got to bond together. That's what I'm hoping this book does, and it's a prescriptive book of what I've done and stories I've learned from other people how to get us through the gray.
Well, it's a message that I'm sure our audience can benefit from. Hopefully they're going to check out your book, Unbreakable. Do want to ask you about some NFL topics here, Jay. What does the league think of Mac Jones? Mac Jones has been the conversation for us ever since the season ended. What's the league-wide view of him? It
did not play like a rookie. Weren't able to confuse him like they can confuse a lot of rookies. They did a great job with Mac Jones. So, yeah, and he definitely carried himself differently than most rookies would.
How big a loss is it that Josh McDaniels is now in Las Vegas, in your opinion?
I don't know, man. Belichick always figures a way out of anything and everything, right? Whether he's had to be a coordinator or, pick things up. So I kind of one of those guys in Bill we trust.
You're so plugged in with everything that's going on around the league. Are you hearing anything about what might happen at offensive coordinator? It's a spot that a lot of people are concerned
over there also too. No, I haven't. Look, if I'm them, I go back to Bill O'Brien. I do call him. I know he's friends with Nick Saban, but hey, Nick, man, I need my guy back, and they know how to work together. He understands Bill's kind of crazy.
Do you think he would be willing to go if it's just for 1 year? He has a family. I know guys can be reluctant. They feel like they might be bouncing their families all over the place.
No, that's the coaching lifestyle. John Fox, when we counted it up one day, I think Fox, he was in 24 cities, something like that, 24, 26.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
It's a coach's lifestyle, right? It's that's what they sign up for.
What'd you hear about Jerod Mayo and the way he interviewed? He's somebody we've worked with quite a bit.
Philadelphia, when he interviewed there, he blew him out of the water. And they called me about it, and I said, if he really blew you out of the water that much, don't make a mistake and whiff on him, because that's what, the Dolphins did that with Mike Tomlin. Oh, we want an offensive coach. And that's what the Eagles said, we want an offensive coach. Man, the Dolphins could have been sound and secure for a long time if they just went with the best guy to lead their team. Mayo blew people out of the water. Is he
destined to get a job then?
Yeah,
is it next off season?
I don't know if it's next off season, but I think he'll get one. Yeah, because things go in kind of weird cycles, and next year may be the year that years ago everybody wanted the good hot defensive coordinator, then everybody wanted the next Sean Payton, then everybody wanted the next Sean McVay, and this year was just they were kind of all over the map.
Last thing I want to ask you is about this Brian Flores lawsuit. We've obviously, us in New England have gotten to know Brian Flores really well, but what do you think this will mean for the league? What's next for the league? Is it drastic overhaul of the Rooney Rule? Is it more than that? How do you think this changes things?
They got to do something, because you only got 2 black head coaches. It's ridiculous. Something has to happen. It's definitely a flawed system. Something has to happen, and it's and we've been having this conversation for so damn long, and something needs to change.
Have you heard that the rule that they put in, it was the end of 2020, I think, that sort of built in these benefits for teams to develop executives and head coaches that were
well,
minorities.
But here's the thing. You're seeing more, general managers getting hired who are minorities, but it shouldn't have to come to that. You shouldn't have to get it where there's more black GMs so you can hire black head coaches. It shouldn't come to that.
Well, Jay Glazer, thanks so much for being with us.
Appreciate
great
it,
to
man.
get your takes on all things NFL. Also to hear about Unbreakable. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest of the week.
Appreciate it, man.
All right. Thanks to Jay Glazer for sitting down and having that conversation with us. Interesting to hear what the league thinks about Mac Jones, about what might happen at the Patriots offensive coordinator spot. He does mention Bill O'Brien there. Again, people not ruling this out. I don't think we should either. So let's give it some time. Let's see how the dust settles on this Patriots coaching staff. I'm sure we'll be continuing to talk about it as the offseason rolls along. Make sure you check out Glazer's new book, Unbreakable, as well. Really good message there. And we have more interviews coming at you on the Next Pats podcast. And so make sure you're keeping an eye out for more Next Pats episodes rolling out very soon, maybe sooner than you normally would be anticipating. So we're going to load you up with some great conversations that we're able to collect out in LA last week. Some fascinating guests I think you guys are going to really love to hear from. So make sure, again, you're keeping an eye out for those. Leave us a review, leave us a comment in there, mock draft, whatever you're feeling at the time. Make sure you leave us a message there so we can go into those, check those out, mention them on the podcast as well. All right, guys, that's it for this one. Thank you very much. We'll be talking to you very, very soon, I promise.